Welcome to episode 15 of the Hike Files podcast. I'm your host, Kurt Zitzelman. What's going on? Last week's day off was not really planned after a series of technical issues and the fact that what I was recording just was not turning out right. So instead of fighting it, I just decided to take the week off. This week is going to be a little bit of a mishmash, a mix-up, a mashup, a mishmash. It's going to be a bunch of stuff. It's not going to be anything in particular, but they are going to be related, including some of the things that happened on the Appalachian Trail, a little bit of a recap of that, and a topic that relates to that very much. I hope you guys enjoyed last episode's live from the trail version of the podcast. It was a little bit harder than I thought it was going to be because I was also recording video for my personal YouTube channel, and I didn't know. I couldn't keep track of what I was recording for the podcast and what I was recording for the video because, well, I'm hiking and creating on top of that becomes a secondary thing. But I hope it turned out all right. The trail itself was awesome. I loved it. It was way more fun than I was expecting. And if the Allegheny Front Trail is not on your list of backpacking trails in the Northeast to do, it really should be. Now, I did the trail in the opposite direction as intended, and that was not on purpose. I'd like to say it was, but it was not. But it did work out in my favor. Now, the trail is designed, it seems like, to be done in the clockwise direction. And what that does is it immediately gives you the vistas off of the actual Allegheny Front. Immediately. Like the first thing that you come across are those vistas. The trail's a little rockier and a little slower through there. There's a lot of climbs and descents. And none of them are huge or difficult, but they're just there. And then you get to a nice, flat, easy section for the rest of your day, and you can make some miles. The campsites along the trail are kind of set up for a clockwise direction. But what that does is on your last day, when you come back up around to the parking lot, it gives you kind of a very easy but kind of boring hike. So by doing it the opposite direction, picking campsites is a little harder, but you get this nice kind of introduction to the area on the first day, and then probably like from the midpoint to the end of your first day, you're going to start getting these beautiful walks along the creeks, like the Black Moshannon, and then you're going to cross over to the Red Mo, the Moshannon Creek, the really polluted one. And that marks a huge change in the trail. So you most likely will camp somewhere along there if you're doing it counterclockwise. It's a little harder to pick a campsite because you either got to make do with an okay, maybe not the greatest campsite at around mile 13 and a half for that direction. I was able to make a campsite work. I had to kind of go up into the woods and find my own spot because where you could put a tent in that campsite, there was a dead tree that was leaning towards it, and I wasn't going to risk that. Otherwise, you got to go like maybe another 2 miles to find really good campsites. And the problem there isn't so much the campsites, but even though you're along the Moshannon Creek, like I said, it's very polluted, and you don't want to get your water from there. So you want to get your water from one of the little tributaries that feed the Moshannon, and they're not all the best. So the guidebook came in really handy with that. That first creek was the best water quality I was going to come across for maybe another mile or two, and I was running out of daylight, so I just made that work. But the further you go counterclockwise, you run into more and more interesting things to see. You got the Moshannon, and then you go up along the 6 mile. And then you go over towards Smage. You go through, and these are all the creeks. And then you go through the Black Moshannon State Park, probably on your last day. And then up into those vistas for your last 4 miles. And those become the payoff. And I really think that was the best way to do it. Yeah, your last day is harder. Well, it starts out easy, but it ends hard. Because you got to do that 4 miles of up and down and up and down and rocks into the vistas and back down and back up and back down. It's a little more work, but I think it's worth it. Now, related to that trip is what I was trying to make an episode out of last week, but there's really not enough there to do it. So just going to make a little bit of a segment for this week, and that is dealing with adversity while you're on the trail. Now, I didn't have anything major go wrong. I didn't get injured. I wasn't lost. I didn't lose anything. Nothing really major happened. But my air pad, my mattress, did develop a leak, and that happened on the first night. And I had no idea. I just used it a couple trips before when I was in the Pinchot State Forest, and I woke up in the morning on day 2, and I was super uncomfortable, and I couldn't figure out why, and it was because I was actually laying on the ground. And I was like, oh, crap. So that could be really bad news, right? Because that's how you sleep. That's how you get rejuvenated. You need that to kind of keep going. But for me, in a situation like that, I just need to make a decision quickly. Like, I knew in my mind, okay, I am just a day's hike away from the car. I could very easily just pack up my stuff and go back the way I came. And I know exactly what I've got. I know, I've already seen everything, so I can kind of I can cruise through, and then I can just come back and try this another day. But I didn't want to do that. I figured I'm going to keep going. I can try to repair the mat, which I couldn't because I didn't bring the repair kit, but I could have tried to repair the mat. Maybe it just leaked because I didn't close the valve all the way. Maybe it just lost air because it got colder. There was a lot of ifs. But I knew that I had more time for the day, and I knew that I was coming up to a lot more, not more better, but a lot more higher quality campsites. That's a better way of saying it. So I could pick and choose the best spot where even if my mat was completely dead, I could be a little more comfortable on the ground I was sleeping on, instead of just picking a spot that was basically the right size and shape to fit my tent like I did on night 1. So I had a little more leeway that way. But sometimes what you run into when you're on trail isn't that simple of a decision. I've been injured on a trail. Luckily, knock on wood, the only time I've ever suffered a major injury was when I was with Peoples on the Appalachian Trail. I've talked about this before. I had rocks go out from underneath me, and as I tried to correct myself, I made the situation worse, and I slammed my face into a rock. Now, for that instance, the quick decision was, am I alive? Am I even okay? I had people with me. They kind of assessed the situation. I was pretty cut up and banged up, but I was basically okay. I didn't break anything. There was no major gouges. I wasn't gushing blood. So my initial quick decision was, let's not stay here. Let's move on to the next road. And that was the decision that was made by me and the group. That wasn't just me like, come on, tally ho, let's go. I wanted to get somewhere where I could stop before the shock of it set in, or before my body started to really feel it, and then sit down and relax and kind of take stock of myself. And then if I really couldn't keep going, I wasn't, a mile back in the woods. I was somewhere where I could easily get out. And then while we were sitting there, I was just kind of checking myself. I've had concussions before. I know what it feels like. I know the signs to look for. And I wasn't recognizing any of those. I didn't feel nauseous. I didn't feel like I wanted to take a nap. I was pretty with it for somebody who just, smashed into a rock. So I made a decision. Yeah, I'm good to keep going. I knew we really only had one difficult part to get through, and that was at the very end. So made the decision to just keep going. Now, if I was by myself, I may not have made that decision. I may have gotten out to that road and just called for somebody to get me out of there. The weird part about that is I probably wouldn't have been there if I was by myself, because the Appalachian Trail is not something that I tend to do solo. I'm not really adverse to the idea, but it's not really a solo hike for me because so many people use the trail, so you're always running into people. So it's not really my preferred place to do a solo trip. But if that were to happen now on a bigger trail, I would find a spot where I could get extracted from if I could, and then make a call and get out of there. The other situation where I had a lot of little bad things happen was up in the Catskills. And I was doing a 3-day trip. It was in the winter, so I had short hours. I had to carry heavy gear because it was winter. and I hiked in about 8 miles. And on that trip, in that 8 miles in, although it doesn't seem like a lot when you're in the mountains, 8 miles is pretty far. I I had all kinds of like recording issues. A lot of my gear was breaking down. I forgot what shoes I was wearing. They didn't have like the toe protection that I was used to with the boots I had been wearing. And I was standing on some rocks, and one of them kind of rolled towards the other and pinched my foot in the rocks and almost broke my toe. I dropped my GPS. It popped off my I was using a standalone GPS, and it popped off my pack when I was sitting down for lunch, and it hit the rock, and it bounced, and it went over the edge. I was able to get it, but it was just all these little things. And then I get to camp, and I have a hard time finding water, and I finally find water, and my filter won't work. And I was like, oh my God. So I was like, should I just turn around? Should I just call this? Is this too many like red flags? Should I just pack it up and go? And I was like, nope. Smart decision is to set up camp, eat what I have that I don't need to boil, save my water for drinking, go to sleep, get some rest, wake up in the morning, and then figure it out from there. Because I had enough food. I had enough no-cook food that if I had to, I could have just walked back out. But when I got up in the morning, a clear head, well rested, the troubles of the day before were gone, and I was able to figure out why my filter wasn't working. I was able to, get water, reassess everything, and realize, okay, I'm fine. Even if my filter didn't work, it's winter in the Catskills. There was chunks of ice around. There was piles of snow. It's all runoff water. Really, I probably don't even need to filter it. I could just boil it if I have to. So it kind of gave me a better peace of mind. But that quick decision was, don't do anything foolish and try to hike out in the dark. Stay put. Get your rest. Eat. Get your wits back about you. And then make your decision. So everyone's going to have a different method for how they deal with things like that. And you're not always going to be in a situation where you can make a decision. You could be sick, you could get injured, and that could compromise your cognitive abilities, and you may not be able to make that decision. But the important thing to remember, and if you only remember one thing in those situations, is you've only got yourself to rely on. So you've got to look past all the BS that's going on, look past all the little things that are just annoyances, find what the core problem is, and then you got to make a decision. Can you overcome it or can't you? And if you can, then you figure out how. And if you can't, then you find a way to get out of the situation. Probably a lot easier said than done, but it's kind of the way you got to think when you're out in a situation, when you're out on a trip and things go wrong. Doesn't matter if it's something little or something big. That finding the core problem, ignoring all the other things, finding the core problem that's going on and trying to overcome that. So in the grand scheme of things, a sleeping pad, not a huge problem, but it's the way it can mentally drain on you. It's a gear failure. Oh, what if I don't get good sleep? You start worrying about that. For me, I just had to put that out of my mind and figure, well, I've slept in worse spots. Sleep is sleep, and it might be uncomfortable, but worse things have happened, and I just moved on. So, and then the last thing that I'm going to talk about today is just a little more news about the Pinchot State Forest. That is the state forest that is local to me, and I've mentioned before how they've kind of grown in leaps and bounds and acquired more and more space. And I may have talked about there's like 600 and some acres that they purchased just off of like the Scranton. Actually, it's in the city border of Scranton, and it goes out into towards the main Thornhurst tract. And they added that maybe 2 months ago. And that may actually already have trails on it. I think the family that owned it I don't know if they were planning on donating it to the DCNR or one of the conservancies, but I think there's already some, at least preliminary trails on it. I haven't been over there yet because I think the only way you can really get into it right now is a trolley ride. They haven't made an actual access to it yet. Yeah, we have trolleys in Scranton. But then I just did see the past couple of days, and I only read briefly about it, that another 1,400 acres of land was acquired by the Pinchot State Forest. And this is down by the Mackinac Loop, which I've been to probably 2 years ago. It's all old coal mine land, and it's all grown back over. It's not like it's like open mines or anything like that. But there was a section to the north of it that was kind of disconnected the Mackinac tract from, I think it's called the Harvey's Creek tract. And I think this 1,400 acre section either closes that gap or greatly reduces that small, there might be just a small section of land now that's not owned by the forest. So again, up there, there's all kinds of old forest roads and mining roads. So they're like built-in trails. So it's interesting to see what happens with that. I know that there's already talks of parking, and I'm pretty sure people were already hiking up there. I'm not sure who owned the land, but I think people were already going in there. So there may already be some hiking opportunities in that spot. So I've kind of joked before about at some point the Pinchot State Forest is going to own all the undeveloped land in the northeast corner of the state, and it's looking like that might actually happen. They are adding a lot, and I'm pretty sure I touched on this before, but I know that there's a lot of conservancies in the southern part of Pennsylvania and in Delaware and Maryland and Virginia who have a great interest in what happens with the land up near me, because all of this is towards the head of the Chesapeake Bay watershed area. Not directly, but it does eventually all go down there. And for Philly, a lot of their water comes from the watershed that we feed into. So they've got a lot of interest in protecting this land to make sure they've got clean water. And I know that 600 acre tract over in Scranton, that was put together by a conservancy in Virginia. I think it was Virginia or Maryland that made the deal to get the land and then made the deal with the DCNR to transfer it over to them. So really interesting to see how these groups are getting together to conserve the land up here, which I love because, I mean, we don't need any more factories and warehouses. The jobs are nice, but there's enough empty buildings in this area that we don't need to keep building new ones to bring people in. They can use the ones we got. So a little bit shorter episode this week, but that's okay. We don't always need to be 30 minutes. Hope you guys enjoyed it. I'll work on something a little bit bigger for next week. This podcast, I tend to just sit down and talk about what's on my mind with the outdoors. So maybe I'll research something this time. No, for episode 16, and I'll bring you something a little bit more in depth. But until then, go outside, enjoy the weather that we're having, because at some point we're going to get winter. It's been pretty warm here. It's going to be, it was almost 75 yesterday here in Northeast PA. That's crazy for October going into November. I'm okay with it, but I would like to see some snow this winter. I don't know if we'll get much. Well, I guess we'll find out. Go outside, enjoy yourselves, and I will talk to you in episode 16 of the Hike Files podcast.